Hi, Sean.
Good morning.
Good morning. Aaron W., what organization are you with?
Sorry, I'm with Cass. I was just trying to see how I can update that.
Rachel, whenever you are ready, you have quorum and can get started.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everybody. With the quorum present, the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Board meeting is now called to order. Please turn on your microphone when speaking and mute when not speaking. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under the COC's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a request to speak card located on the information table and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validations are available on the information table. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Katie, please take roll call. Members of the board, please say you are here and your organization after Katie calls your name.
Thank you, Rachel. Jessica Cruz.
Here, Jessica Cruz from Native American Connections.
Thank you. Liz DaCosta.
Hello, Liz DaCosta with Access.
Thank you. Lisa Glow. Chris Hallett.
Hello, Chris Hallett, City of Peoria.
Thank you. Michael Hughes.
Here, a new leaf.
Thank you. Natalie Lewis. Sean Pierce.
Sean Pierce, Maricopa County.
Thank you. Charles Sullivan.
Hi, Charles Sullivan, Arizona Behavioral Health Corporation.
Thank you. Deanna Valdez. Cricket Weatherington.
Here, Arizona Housing Inc.
Thank you. Danielle Wright.
Hi, good morning, Danielle Wright, Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence.
Thank you. Co-chair Rachel Milne.
Rachel Milne, City of Phoenix.
Thank you. Co-chair Vicki Phillips. With that, you have a quorum. Back to you, co-chair.
Thanks, Katie. The next item on the agenda is a call to the audience. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under the Continuum of Care Board that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Katie, were there any comments received or anyone who wishes to offer comments at this time?
Madam Chair, there were no comments received and no one here to offer comments at this time.
Thank you. We will move on to the next agenda item. Our next item is the approval of the consent agenda. Item 3A is on the agenda for consent. Does any member of the board have questions, comments, or request a presentation of this item? Does any member of the public wish to comment on any items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve consent item 3A?
I move for approval.
I second.
That's a first from Michael and a second from Cricket.
Thank you. Is there discussion of the motion from the board or comments from the public? For those in the room, we'll take a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yay.
Yay.
Those opposed, please say nay. I will now ask Katie to proceed with a roll call vote of those joining online.
Thank you, Co-chair Milne. Liz DaCosta.
Yay.
Chris Hallett.
Yay.
Natalie Lewis.
Should I abstain since Mesa is part of this?
This is just for approval of the minutes, Natalie.
Oh, yay.
Thank you. Sean Pierce.
Yay.
Sienna Valdez. You are in the room. Danielle Wright.
Yay.
Rachel Milne.
Yay.
The motion passes. We will go to our next agenda item.
Thanks, Katie. Over the past week, week, the Rank and Review Committee has been hard at work reviewing applications, interviewing applicants, and discussing the available funding through HUD. A huge thank you to Nikki Ramirez, Andy Wambach, Tanea Wright, Cindy Yakahu Ayampa, Natalie Davenport, and Cole Hickman for the time and energy that you all have put in over the past few weeks. We could not have done this without you. And I'll now turn it over to the Rank and Review Committee to present on our priority listings.
Good morning, everyone. I will be starting off this presentation. So as you just said, the Rank and Review Committee reviewed applications for this year's funding. So next slide. This year, the total amount for funding was $35,223,127. Of this, $32,757,508 was allocated to Tier 1. $2,465,619 was allocated to Tier 2. Next slide. There were in total 37 projects submitted for this year. This included 7 new projects, 2 rapid rehousing projects, 2 joint transitional housing rapid rehousing projects, 2 coordinated entry expansions, 1 HMIS expansion. In addition, there were 30 renewals and 1 voluntary partial reallocation. Next slide. Quick overview of the Rank and Review process. First, MAG staff reviewed eSNAP's project applications for technical corrections and eligibility. Applicants then reviewed their scores and had an opportunity to provide corrections and narrative explanations for their data. The committee then interviewed applicants and allocated interview points. The committee then reviewed renewal applications and considered discretionary points, as well as scored new projects. The committee's scoring was consensus-based. The committee then crafted 4 funding options per the Rank and Review process. Next slide. The Rank and Review Committee was made up of 6 members this year, representing county, youth, healthcare, and nonprofit. This included Andy Wambach, Mercy Care, Cindy Hiwako Ocampo from the Youth Action Committee, Cole Hickman, Maricopa County, Natalie Davenport, US Vets, Nikki Ramirez, Goodwill, and Tanea Wright from the Lived Experience Committee. Next slide.
The Rank and Review principles are laid out in 4 options. Option 1 are raw scores. This is infrastructure projects ranks after the point cliff, no discretionary points included. Option 2 are the raw scores and then the discretionary points. Infrastructure projects ranked after points cliff. Option 3 are the raw scores plus discretionary points with an infrastructure preference. And option 4 are the raw scores plus discretionary points with a housing preference. Next slide, please. Tier 1 receives the full amount of funding. The order of the projects in Tier 1 does not affect the funding that they would receive. Tier 2 would compete nationally based on the quality of their consolidated application. And Tier 2 projects can be partially funded, so the order of the projects must be taken into consideration. The higher ranking a project would be on that list, the more likely it would be funded depending on the amount. The impact of funding options for option 1 or the raw scores, there would be 2,010 existing units in Tier 1, 75 existing units and 45 new units plus infrastructure in Tier 2, and not funded would be 60 existing units and 150 new units. Option 2, raw plus discretionary, would be 2,005 existing units. Tier 2 would be 80 existing units and 45 new plus infrastructure. Not funded, again, would be 60 existing and 150 new units. Next slide, please. Option 3 would be option 2 with an infrastructure preference. So the same amount of units in Tier 1, 110 existing units and 17 new in Tier 2 plus infrastructure preferences. Not funded would be 30 existing units, 179 new units. Option 4 is option 3 with a housing preference. So the primary change would be 27 new units in tier 2 instead of 17, and a reduced coordinated entry infrastructure preference. Not funded, again, would be 30 existing units and 169 new units.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole and Natalie. Now to the fun stuff, right? What's our recommendation? I just want to add that even though we're all here presenting on behalf of the Rank and Review Committee, that it is consensus based. So this reflects all of the hard work of the committee, not just, you know, my personal beliefs. I really just selfishly wanted to see cricket today.
Yay.
But anyways, obviously this is super challenging. When we do things like this, it's commonly a lot of focus on who doesn't get funding, unfortunately, but there are a lot of good applications this year. So this year, our Rank and Review Committee recommends option 3. We feel that this honors a number of board priorities with prioritizing renewal projects in tier 2, as well as infrastructure, and even adding an element of new funding for a new housing project. Ultimately, if you're looking at your spreadsheet, for option 3 in tier 2, you can see that Solari straddles tier 1 and tier 2, which ultimately increases the likelihood of that being funded. This due to a pretty significant demonstrated need in the community for increased HMIS capacity. There is sort of a HUD metric that outlines a standard for communities to at least aim for regarding their ratio of staff to number of users in their system. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but I'm sure Solari could provide it. But ultimately, I think the standard from HUD is a 75 to 1 staff ratio. And I know Solari was well below that. So their project would ultimately be increasing capacity for additional 2 staff for that infrastructure sort of need. Keeping in mind, coordinated entry is also implicated here around infrastructure. Any new tools that get implemented into the system through coordinated entry is obviously going to be a lift for those coordinated entry leads at UMOM and HSC, but also it's a pretty significant lift for Solari and that HMIS team as well. And so prioritizing this project is critical. Another thing to point out ultimately is that, again, I think I mentioned that we do prioritize a rapid rehousing project there as well for partial funding. Those coordinated entry projects as well, trying to align with that infrastructure need. And I think maybe you'll notice that there's a housing project. Again, we really, obviously, when you're making these decisions, you know, between units and infrastructure, we didn't take that lightly. So prioritizing any renewal projects, keeping in mind that any PSH projects that don't get funded, it's a challenge to rehouse those folks and kind of absorb that into the existing system and make sure folks are not reverting back to homelessness. That said, I think our community ultimately comes together when they need to, but prioritizing those projects is also important. So I will pause there. I think that covers it all. Katie will probably let me know if I missed something.
Thank you, Andy, Cole, and Natalie. If we could, Tyler, go back to seeing everybody on the screen. Thank you. And I'll throw it back to you, Co-Chair Melanie.
Thank you. And I really just want to thank the Rank and Review Committee. It is a lot of work. So thank you so much. And I know putting together the recommendation is also very tough to take in all of the need in the community. So I really thank everyone who participated in Rank and Review this year. So next up, we want comments and discussion from the board. And I can see that Natalie is raising her hand. Natalie, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. And I echo your comments about thanking the committee for all the work that you did on this, because I like Rachel said, it is a very detailed, takes a lot of time. So thank you for that. I just had some kind of clarifying questions for you. When you say existing versus new housing, I'm thinking about the new housing that's come on board during the pandemic and that we've been using ARPA dollars. Would that be considered existing, or would that be considered in the new kind of pot?
Natalie, all of the funds that would be considered existing were previously funded by the Continuum of Care. So our funding did not increase because of American Rescue Plan dollars. Last year, or I guess in 2021, we did not decrease, which is the typical HUD model of putting some percentage in our tier 2. We've been lucky to receive our entire tier 2 last year. So we added new projects last year, but in traditional COC funding model rather than in ARPA money. If somebody were to be applying for, like, be running an ARPA program right now, and then they applied to the COC, the review panel, some of the questions that were asked to new applicants was about what is your grant spend down with other federal money? So that was taken into consideration, but it was still considered a new grant for our program.
I was just curious if any of this was going to help us with Cliff for some of these projects, which are so important moving forward. And then the only other question that I have, and this is just one of the things that I'm always looking at for Mesa, is the sense of all of the nonprofit partners working together as part of a system. And so do you all feel, based on your experience with these nonprofits and the work that they're doing, that they really are part of that and working together and not in a silo?
On a number of questions that the Rank and Review considered, there were questions about coordination with community programs, about planning for move-on strategies, and the committee prioritized applications that really outlined specific agencies that they partnered with, specific plans, partnerships that they had currently, and demonstrated working plans with other partners, so that there was a real proof of concept for coordination, not just a theoretical, but a practice. That was an ongoing priority. And a number of the agencies that did receive additional points, it was based on providing detailed outlines of their current service strategies, their coordination and their planning with a lot of different providers, whether medical care, substance use treatment, mental health services, coordinated entry, local providers. We put a lot of emphasis on that on those questions.
Thanks, Cole. Thanks, Natalie, for your questions. Liz, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Yes. And thank you so much to Rank and Review for all the time that you've spent on this. So we have 4 priority listings, and I heard you say that you are recommending option 3. Can we confirm that that is priority listing number 4, option 3, with a preference to housing?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm, in what I see though, it still looks like we're doing a preference to infrastructure.
Liz,
Yeah.
it's priority list 3, option 2 with preference to infrastructure.
That's the one that you guys are recommending?
Yeah, on the 3rd page.
Okay.
Sorry.
And so, yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for that.
It is it's page 3. So it is 2023 final project priority list 3, option 2 with preference to infrastructure is the full title across the top.
Thank you.
I thought you were doing the other one.
Excellent. And then, in our board meeting where we talked about priorities, I don't recall us saying that infrastructure was a priority. I recall us asking to see kind of both options, what it would look like if we prioritized infrastructure versus what it would look like if we prioritized housing. And the challenge is that on the priority 4 listing, when we say we're or giving a preference to housing, I don't necessarily see that. I see that we still have listed HMIS quality expansion and the coordinated entry expansions in tier 2. So can you guys kind of tell me what your thought process on that was?
Yeah, we can talk through that a little bit. I think ultimately trying to balance that housing preference for existing projects that kind of have demonstrated their success, but also keeping in mind, right, we have to keep in mind scores and at some point kind of establish some sort of cliff there. And if, based on applications and kind of demonstrations or lack thereof, we do need to make some tough decisions around that while also still trying to prioritize housing as best we possibly can. Also keeping in mind that new project versus existing project balance, right, kind of giving preference to those projects that have done it before while also kind of trying to score them as fairly as possible.
Thank you. I think for me, it still lists in a preference towards infrastructure. So when we look at preference to infrastructure versus preference to housing, the infrastructure was the HMIS and the coordinated entry. And so we aren't able to really see what it would look like if we did a preference to housing.
May I kind of follow up, Liz? So I'm curious, or I'm actually understanding exactly what you're saying. And so if we're talking about a cliff and we're talking about page 4, priority list 4, option 3, and we're saying that, line number 24 scored 83.5. And then you see line 26 scored an 83.25. I'm not really seeing a cliff there. So I'm catching what you're saying, Liz, and I too am not entirely sure how the thought process behind that in regards to the preference to housing rather than infrastructure.
So when we're talking about a cliff for, say, options 3 or 4, the only project that is kind of below that threshold is going to be, or at least teetering on it, was City of Mesa, which we still prioritize. And then the other housing projects are going to be new projects. So, I mean, again, ultimately, I think option 4 does try to do that as we prioritize past rapid rehousing project over infrastructure. Again, HMIS was just looking to increase for those 2 positions, and we tried to kind of boost in option 4 to give you something to look at and react to, while also still kind of keeping in mind that we spent hours and hours kind of painstakingly reviewing these housing projects. And we do need to at some point kind of establish a cut line there based on quality of application.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of close out. I see that Chris has his hand up. When we're looking at these resources, of course, we've got a very large number of individuals on our by name list, a huge concern with unsheltered homelessness. So what, when we're looking at how many total dollars do we have coming into our community that can actually pay for rental assistance and case management to, meet the needs of our members. We were really looking to try to see what it would look like to provide a preference to housing, which would include, projects that are scoring higher in their new applications than existing projects, looking at what it would look like to prioritize those programs for funding so we can essentially get more dollars out for rental assistance. I had asked to hear more about the needs of the coordinated entry system. In one of the meetings, we asked for the coordinated entry system or committee to come and communicate to the board, kind of what they were looking at, give us kind of a business case for their analysis as to why they were seeking more funding. I hear that you heard that from Solari, so I'm not sure if we have any further information on that. I think the last thing I would ask is if HUD is recommending a 1 to 75 for our HMIS staff, do they also have any kind of a breakdown in the percentage of the total award that goes towards your HMIS and infrastructure versus what goes to housing when it comes to your total award for your community?
I'll jump in. This is Katie, and then I'll shift over to Chris.
Thanks.
The CE committee update happened at the end of like a week and a half ago at the August 28th board meeting. I know, Liz, you were out of town, but that was available. We, as far as funding infrastructure, every other COC, we are underfunded comparatively to other COCs when it comes to infrastructure. So HMIS specifically has a recommended ratio of 75:1, which would mean we would have 16 staff. HMIS is currently at 8, so this would take them up to 11. There is not, to my knowledge, that same recommended ratio on the coordinated entry side for many reasons, but access points being a large part of it. I will say that one of the, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Ranking Review Committee, so feel free to jump in, but I think they spent quite a bit of time mulling over housing versus coordinated entry and what did this look like. And they really did feel like the coordinated entry applications really did explain why the need is there and why there is a need for increase. So I will pause and let you all expand on anything. I just see your heads nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add, I mean, there's been conversations around coordinated entry tools and priority. I mean, you name it, right? For years and years, it'll never end, right? But more specifically, right, we have technical assistance around this. So, how does our community anticipate to implement these things that are very complex without investing in infrastructure? So I'll kind of just add that piece.
The one other thing that I will add is the main difference between options 3 and 4 was offering the opportunity for the tier 2 proposal to have another fully funded rapid rehousing program and a partially funded coordinated entry, tier 3 being fully funded coordinated entry and partially funded rapid if tier 2 is fully funded. And so that the difference between those strategies was just taking into account the possibility that tier 2 may not be fully funded. And if that were the case, what would be the priorities based on that? And that's why we wanted to outline those 2 different strategies in these 2 options.
Thank you, Cole. Chris, do you have a question?
Yeah, I got a couple. Just to that same point. So tier 2, how is that score? I know it's competitive. So how is it scored, as a block or individually? How we rank them matters or not? Or is it the ranking only matter for partial funding at the bottom?
So tier 2 is funded based off of our COC's consolidated application competitively. So our score gets, as long as applications, which everything we're submitting is an eligible expense. So as long as those are eligible, then if we score high enough, then our tier 2 will get more funded. So basically what HUD does is they go through the COC consolidated applications after they've funded all of tier 1 across all the COCs, and then give money to tier 2 as funding allows in our competitive nature. So we historically have been a higher scoring COC. And typically if you score above the median, you get the majority of your tier 2. For the last 3 years, we've received all of our tier 2, but it is not a guarantee. And as you all know, and we've been talking about, our system performance measures, which are a huge part of our consolidated application, are moving in the wrong direction. So those objective metrics are places where we will lose points, no matter how well of an application we write. So there's definitely places where we think we will score well, and our team has been working quite a bit of time on that complete application. But nothing is a guaranteed, and they could fund like 3/4 of our tier 2 as an option, depending on how we competitively score.
So if we're partially funded at 3/4, how does it apply? Do you go up 25% from the bottom and everybody's fully funded from the top of the tier 2?
Correct. They go down from the top of tier 2. So just like you said, that bottom 25% would not get funded.
Okay, a couple other just technical ones. I think you said there's 37 projects. All are numbered except for a New Leaf. Why isn't New Leaf numbered?
A New Leaf is it was an expansion grant last year that was held harmless. So their expansion part was held harmless, but their renewal grant was actually in the exceeds available. So we will be splitting their grant. And so it will be a reduction. Anything that's in our orange tier exceeds available will actually not be scored, and then we'll be readjusting. So we have to redo this once we pull off our exceeds available for our final listing.
And then similarly, the voluntary reallocation for Chicanas por la Casa, what there's dollar amount down there, and then they're listed up under number 1 as well.
Yeah, their renewal application, their joint project, was originally funded at $449,012, and they chose to voluntarily reallocate the $336,759 on their own. They're held harmless this year because they don't yet have a full year of grant finalized that we can evaluate them on their outcomes, and so they'll get evaluated next year, but they were having concerns around being able to serve the number of people that they had originally committed to, and so they voluntarily chose to release that additional money.
Okay, and then are there no DV projects?
We did not receive any DV bonus projects. We sought out additional after the application had closed, and sent out another notification. It was a quick turnaround, and we had folks reach out to us, but we did not have anybody submit applications.
And then on the tier 2, I guess this is infrastructure emphasis. Is that correct or no? Yeah,
Correct.
preference to infrastructure. And then I think one of the things they said on the thing was the board's priorities, and I thought we had like permanent supportive housing above rapid rehousing as well, but I didn't see that here.
So the permanent supportive housing was still in the context of higher scoring renewals. So it did still go into scoring categories. So this followed scoring rather than just putting PSH above rapid rehousing, is the consideration that the board had given, was our interpretation of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris and Katie. Are there any other questions? Katie, I can't tell if there are questions in the room. Sorry.
Yes, Cricket is next.
Okay.
We have just two. One's just a comment around the infrastructure and the coordinated entry. For sure, we have other funding sources for housing. We don't have a lot for that infrastructure. So in my mind, when I'm thinking about it, you're not going to probably get a philanthropic organization to fund that kind of thing. So I think it's important that we consider that. And then I had a question regarding the new units on the 2 slides where it said the different tiers, and I don't need you to go line by line, but how many of them are vouchers for existing, how many housing, and are any of them for construction related to a tax credit or something else? So just wondering if it's all like vouchers on the street now, or is it supporting the building of new housing?
There is no infrastructure costs in our COC application currently. So that is not to say that in the future, these couldn't be place-based at a LIHTC property, but currently they are all applying as scattered site.
Okay, so all the units are already constructed. We're not building anything to use these, right? Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Right, Michael.
Thank-
I have a question. First of all, thank you to the committee. That is it's almost a thankless, especially with the question I'm about to ask. But my question I'm struggling with, I look at the 83.5, and then I look at the 83.25. And to me, it just almost feels like a statistical tie. And I'm looking at, in other words, Community Bridges, who scored 83.5, and then UMOM scored 83.25. And then UMOM is in a sense out the 900. And the bubble of Community Bridges, the last three. Is there anything that can be done differently? When you look at, I understand, for instance, the next score, to me, that's a big gap, the 71. And so that, to me, it's not to be questioned. But when you look at something so small and such a significant amount, I'm just struggling with, because it is subjective scoring, so to say. Isn't there something that can be done that can be, how can that be actually reviewed or looked at? Because to me, it feels so narrow that I'm struggling with that. And I don't know how others feel, but when you see something that narrow.
So I'm happy to weigh in on Rankin Review's thoughts. Actually, they had made the cliff at the 85.5 mark comparatively to 83.5 and preference CBI because it was a PSH program. So they had originally ranked Solari above the CBI program that is PSH. And then decided to change it because it was a PSH program. So I don't know if that helps at all. So lines 24 and 25, originally Solari was above line 24, the CBI PSH 75. And they had made that cliff there. So I know it feels weird that it's this 0.25 difference, but that was their cliff difference.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like, I feel, I hear what you're saying, totally respect it. But again, to Katie's point, it is a razor, like the margin is a razor. Like there's a program, ultimately we could go the other way and UMOM, one of those rapid rehousing projects is still going to be in tier 2, isn't it? Even if we still prioritize them above Solari, or a PSH renewal project is going to go down into tier 2, and then a rapid rehousing renewal project goes back up and it gets funded. And so it goes, at least that's how I see it. So it sounds to me like you're moving towards, even more of a sort of technical process type question that I don't know that I can really answer.
Is the likelihood of the number, the tier 2 of that being funded, is that still very high?
I would say the higher up in tier 2, the more likely, because we are a higher scoring CFC. I mean, all I can say is the last 3 years we've had our entire tier 2 funded. I think last year we were still more competitive than we are this year because of our system performance measures. But I guess I'll tap on my staff a little bit. They write a really good application and really do a thorough job of explaining what we're doing in the community. So I think that there is, and I think that's something that the committee really took into consideration, is the higher up in tier 2 is still just as critical too. So that's why they ranked them the way that they did. That's why they, even though you have some higher scoring new projects, those renewal projects were still more important.
And please know, I'm not questioning the committee in any way, shape or form. I don't want to infer that. I'm saying maybe it is the application or the process. I'm saying it's just so narrow. Is there any other alternative when it comes out to something that, especially when the next one is 10 points lower? That's all.
So Katie, what is, I mean, I understand the infrastructure, I understand tier 2. Is, if the board were to say, we'd still like to see, you know, UMOM and City of Mesa bumped, and then, you know, Solari, the new project below that, is that a recommendation we would be able to say we'd like to see?
Sorry, I'm consulting our rank and review process because I believe that at this point, the process is that they present recommendations to you and then you all can choose to accept them. I don't know if we've ever had the board reject a rank and review committee listing. Like you're able to choose other ones, but let me pause.
And I don't know that that's what we're saying. I'm just curious if that is I'm hearing different things from the board, so.
How our rank and review policy is currently written is that they would present and then you all would accept one of their listings. You don't have to accept the one that they're recommending, but you would be accepting one of them.
Thanks, Katie. Is there any other discussion?
I have a quick question. So just even on option 1, just because that did change, it's based on raw score. And there's no scores for the infrastructure, but yet they're ranked amongst those that are scored. So how is it they're placed there on a raw score basis?
So we scored those applications, but because they're new applications and their infrastructure, it's apples to oranges. And so ultimately we scored them, but providing their score, it's
different.
Yeah.
Any other discussion or questions in the room? Is there a board member who's willing to make a motion?
I move that we accept the recommended option of that whole long thing. List option 2 with preference to infrastructure, as presented.
Thanks, Cricket. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you,
I was
Chris.
going to second that. And I did want to say, thank you, Chris. The questions you asked were the questions that I had. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Chris and Danielle. So we have a motion from Cricket and a second from Chris and Danielle. For those in the room, we'll take a voice vote. And as a reminder, if you are a board member that is part of the priority listing, you must abstain from the vote. For all those in favor, please say yes.
It's just Cricket and she says yes.
Those opposed, please say nay. And then Katie, if you could do a roll call for those joining online, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair Milne. Liz DeCosta,
Yes.
Chris Hallett.
Big thank you to the committee. Yes.
Thank you. Natalie, I'm asking you to abstain. Sean Pierce,
Again, thank you to the committee and yes.
Danielle Wright,
Thank you. Yes.
Co-Chair Rachel Milne.
Yes, thank you.
Passes. Back to you, Co-Chair.
Awesome. One more time, thanks so much, Rank and Review, and thanks to your employers who let you take 2 weeks to do all of this work. I know it's a huge amount of time and effort, so thank you, thank you. Next on the agenda is the request for future agenda items. Do board members have any action or discussion items for future meetings?
This is Liz. So I know that I missed the coordinate entry update. I'm glad though that folks on the board were able to hear it and you felt that it provided you with the information you needed to be able to prioritize infrastructure. So it's good to be a part of a board of people as opposed to one. So thank you for that. I do still feel like we lack updates from, I would say, our HMIS lead. From my position, I'm very new to the board, but really to kind of see, what exactly are they working on from their perspective. I see you did a lot of the update for coordinate entry, Katie, so we just appreciate you so much. But so for my future agenda item requests, I would like to receive a presentation from our HMIS lead on what their current needs are and then what their plans for the funds will be. And then same from our coordinate entry subcommittees, both the family side and then also the singles. What are they going to do with the prioritization for the infrastructure dollars in the decision we just made? What are their plans?
Can do.
Thanks.
I want to just echo that. Thank you, Liz. I was wondering the same thing on HMIS. Not sure to what extent they can have a live view of what's in there. We're trying to figure out ways out here to marry what's in HMIS with our providers that have to manage things outside of HMIS. So it's really curious to know what can and cannot be done by HMIS, whether it's can or can't from a money thing, right? Meaning it can be done, but it takes some money to do that when it comes to modifying or what's tracking, because it's a big toll for our providers and outreach to manage two systems. And so I really want to understand that in this presentation, what their needs are for sure, but really what its capabilities are and what it would cost for future. And I'm not sure really what was in this application to know what this will fund from an infrastructure, but I would like a little bit more of an in-depth opportunity. So if they had something had on the screen that they could show us that doesn't violate any HIPAA or anything, but more statistical kind of reporting or whatnots, or geography or something that our providers could find useful, and I'll try and find out for that meeting what their needs are from HMIS as well.
Thank you, Chris. Natalie, did I see your hand up? No, okay.
Rachel, I have a question.
Okay.
How does the plan, does the MAG planning grant go in with this? Is this part of the, would it be possible for the board to get a presentation on what that is, or some grant, something related to either let us see the application or whatever works, just so that we can understand the big picture of everything at the next, obviously.
Sorry, you just asked for two separate things.
Sorry.
Consolidated application and planning grant.
No, I want your planning grant. But it does it go in as part of the consolidated?
Separate applications.
Okay, so I would like us to get a presentation on what that application was included in that, and thank you.
Good. And I see Chris has his hand up.
Yes, just to follow up on that. I know we self-score ourselves? And if so, could we go over that and the next one to see how we scored ourselves and how that compared to prior years? Katie, you were mentioning certain, things that we don't necessarily control. We score either well on or poor on compared to last year. So I think it'd be nice for us to review our own self-assessment of the scoring to see what we're up against nationally.
We don't score ourselves, Chris, but we're happy to do an analysis. Like we do an internal analysis of like where can we improve based off of our scores last year. And some scores are purely objective and some scores are subjective of like you write a narrative. So our objective scores are like, for example, with the system performance measures, are you increasing first-time homeless? If you decrease by 5%, you get, I think, 4 points. If you increase, you get 0 points. So those are the ones where our system performance measures are going in the wrong direction on many of the different metrics. And so we know those objective measures, but we're happy to provide an analysis of kind of with the consolidated application where we think we will lose points. There's also places where we know we will gain. Last year, we lost points on our rapid rehousing production versus this year we will gain, and it's a complete objective 9 points straight. So happy to provide kind of an overview of the consolidated application. The whole consolidated application will actually be coming to you at the next meeting for your approval before we submit it. So we can walk through kind of an overview. It's 200+ pages, so I won't make you read every single page of it, but we can give a brief overview of kind of all the different components of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for future agenda items? All right, then with no further business, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.